Alright, so this video will be about the calls for the repatriation of Ryukyuan remains. So, Ryukyuans, or Okinawans, I will be referring to them as Ryukyuans for the rest of this video, are the indigenous inhabitants of the Ryukyu Islands, or Okinawa, which were once ruled by the Ryukyu Kingdom until they were annexed by Japan as Okinawa Prefecture in 1879. And then after World War II in 1945, Okinawa was occupied by the U.S. military until 1972, when it was returned to Japan. Many Ryukyuans have called for academic institutions, most notably Kyoto University, to repatriate the remains of Ryukyuans that were housed at these institutions for the purpose of academic research back to Okinawa. So, when Japan colonized the Ryukyu Islands during the Meiji era, Ryukyuans were forcibly assimilated into Japanese society and forced to abandon their traditional customs. And this was when Ryukyuan remains were taken by Kyoto University anthropology professors back to the university to be studied in scientific research, and there are now calls for these remains to be repatriated. And in addition to the systemic discrimination in Okinawa, as reported by Steve Rabson, many Ryukyuans moved to mainland Japan and were treated poorly, with dangerous jobs and low pay being all that was available to them, and they were forced to hide any Ryukyuan attributes and their Ryukyuan culture if they wanted to avoid discrimination for what was seen as not being Japanese. And this had been justified by ideas of Japanese homogeneity, which, as John Lee pointed out, evolved from the colonial empire's idea of this one great Asian sphere of influence that then, after the war, became this idea of a mono-ethnic Japan with one unchanged people that cannot be altered by outsiders. And as seen in the documentary film Being Japanese, as well as Steve Rabson's research, many Ryukyuans today have a complex relationship with Japanese identity, with some choosing to be Ryukyuan first and others choosing to identify with aspects of both Ryukyuan and Japanese culture. Now, central to these calls for repatriation is the recognition of Ryukyuans as an indigenous people with their own unique culture that should be protected. Now, the Ainu, who are indigenous to Hokkaido in northern Japan, are another indigenous group that has also been forcibly assimilated into Japanese society and faced extreme discrimination even before the annexation of Okinawa. And after decades of lobbying, the Ainu were officially recognized as indigenous in 2008, but Ryukyuans do not have the same recognition from the government, though they are recognized as such by intergovernmental bodies such as the United Nations. And according to research by Abe, some Ryukyuans have been using international law to claim a right to self-determination. And Ainu calls for the repatriation of remains have been more high profile. In the 1930s, Ainu remains in Urahoro, Hokkaido were exhumed to be used for research by people from Hokkaido University. And eventually, Ainu activists sued Hokkaido University for the repatriation of these remains in 2012 and 2014, and the university eventually agreed to repatriate these remains back to the Ainu. So in 2018, Ryukyuan sued Kyoto University for the repatriation of the remains that were stolen by anthropologists. And during this case, discussions of whether Ryukyuans should be recognized as indigenous were sparked, according to research by Yugo Tomonaga. And in 2022, a Kyoto District Court ruled that Kyoto University did not commit any illegal acts. And despite this loss and the lack of awareness, the movement for the repatriation of Ryukyu remains continues to grow, and another trial is occurring right now, this time in the Osaka High Court. And so, as for the implications of this court case, the myths of homogeneity in Japanese society still persist, and the issues faced by Ryukyuans are largely unknown and overlooked, and their unique indigenous culture is not recognized or respected by the Japanese government. But at the same time, awareness of Ryukyuan issues continues to grow, and this is exemplified by the movement to repatriate these Ryukyuan remains. These are the sources that I used for the images and my slides, and these are the sources for the information in my presentation. Thank you.